new discoveries are made every, ancient structures every month, every day, every week, and it just goes on and on. I'm just going to show you a few of these that you're all familiar with, just to remind you of some of the great ancient civilizations and structures that have been discovered over the years, just to cement some of this and remind us of what's what has been discovered and so much more that is undiscovered. It is truly spectacular to realize how little we know about our history, our world, and what I've been calling the hidden history of our Earth and the hidden history of our world, only to realize that we know so little. We literally are like babies waking up from our cradle and looking up at the sky and wondering what the hell is going on? Who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? And what's going on? And, if we fed a bunch of lies and deceptions, then what foundational knowledge and information do we have to even question those lies, or to make any concrete conclusions about who we are, where we come from? What I found fascinating is all those ancient ruins that I've just shared with you all happen to be in the northern hemisphere or very close to the equator. Very little has been discovered in the southern hemisphere in terms of really impressive ancient sites. Obviously, Australia is full of ancient Aboriginal sites. Other parts of Brazil and South America are filled. But Southern Africa, for all intents and purposes, or for all of recorded history of research, has produced very little evidence of ancient vanished civilizations. And yet they keep telling us that the origins of humankind happened somewhere in Southern Africa. So if the cradle of humankind is somewhere in Southern Africa, there must be evidence, much more evidence, of human activity in Southern Africa. And that's exactly what my discovery is all about, is discovering the ancient ruins, the ancient vanished civilizations of Southern Africa. So welcome to my world. Welcome to my part of the world. This is a photograph of me standing on one of the spectacular stone circle ruins. Shortly, I was introduced to it in 2007. And that led me down this journey of discovery that truly opened my eyes and opened up many channels and many doors to realizing how little we know and how much ancient civilization activity there is in Southern Africa, together with all the other incredible discoveries that I'm going to touch upon in this very short presentation, that deals with technology, deals with energy, deals with ancient advanced technologies and Anunnaki, ancient gold mines, and so much more. So this first part of this presentation is really about the discovering of the vanished civilizations of Southern Africa. Left behind more than 10 million circular stone ruins in the shape of these stone circles. They became known as the stone circles of Southern Africa. And very little was written about this until I came along in 2007, when I was introduced to them by Johann Heine, and who also introduced me to Adam's calendar, or what he called the stone calendar that he discovered, and nobody was interested in exploring or researching. So until I came along, there were a few textbooks, there were a few comments and some research written about this, but a very scant, very broad information and very little knowledge about these stone circles. And most of these mainstream historical academic books that were written about the ruins of Southern Africa, the stone circles, always jumped and leaped to conclusions based on their limited knowledge of ancient African cultures, ancient tribal African cultures, and the stone structures that Western civilizations or Eurocentric explorers and researchers would have imposed on ancient civilizations in Southern Africa, which is very far from the truth and from the reality that I share, that I've discovered. So my calculation is that there are more or less, or in round about 10 million of these structures. I might be wrong. It could be 5 million. It could be 3 million. It could be more. It could be 15 million. It's very difficult to say because they've been so destroyed and they've been so neglected and destroyed through farm work, through city development, through road development, and town planning, and so forth. But what you start recognizing when you look at these stone structures is that this is obviously a huge vanished civilization that we're finding the evidence of. This is not something that was just left behind by a group of migrating tribes that were building dwellings for themselves while they settled here or settled there. This is a very different kind of time in our human history and a very different kind of activity that we cannot understand at this stage. What we're looking at here is the largest cluster of stone ruins found anywhere on Earth. And as I said, I calculated to be about 10 million of them. It could be less, it could be more. What's important that these stone circles are not standalone structures. They're all connected by these channels that you can see. They look like pathways from aerial photographs. And then also the spider's web effect that goes out and away from each stone circle. This is very important to recognize and realize that there's much more going on than that first meets the eye. Here you can see another angle from a drone shot of the channel running along, and then stone circles here that are connected to the channels with small channels that run out of the stone circle and connect to the channels that connect all of them together. It's just a giant network of stone circles and channels and other structures in between that often look like spiders' webs that connect everything together. It's unimaginable the amount of work that went into creating this and building this. We can't imagine this. We can imagine building the pyramid, and they often say we can't build the pyramids, we can't recreate them. My argument is that with 3D printing now and absolute computerized technology, and we could probably rebuild the pyramid. But to try and rebuild this is simply impossible. It's just not possible. It's millions of these ruins with trillions of stones positioned in a particular way, creating these shapes of the stone circles for a very specific reason, which you'll discover shortly if you don't know that already. For us to do this today, it's just simply impossible. Especially when you walk among these ruins and you notice how they were built and how they were structured. The fact that they have no doors and entrances is a very important breakthrough discovery that was made in 1939 already by our historians and universities in South Africa. But as soon as they discovered that the original structures had no doors and entrances, they simply ignored it and carried on with the preconceived conclusion that these structures were built by migrating tribes as dwellings for themselves. So these migrating tribes are building dwellings without doors and entrances. So you can see very quickly how nonsensical those conclusions are. So once we conclude that there are no doors and entrances, and many archaeological drawings like this, or like this, show us clearly that even the archaeological drawings illustrate that there are no doors and entrances to these stone structures. But yet our mainstream archaeologists concluded, and historians concluded, that these were dwellings built by migrating tribes. For someone like me, obviously, who understands sound, resonance, frequency, and the generation of energy through resonance and vibration, this suddenly took on a whole different meaning. What these stone circle ruins of Southern Africa do as well is they actually cover about 450,000 square kilometers between South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, parts of Mozambique. It actually goes all the way up into Zambia and covers parts of Swaziland and so forth, and Botswana. 450,000 kilometers of agricultural terraces. So you got to ask yourself, who built these structures? Who lived here? How many people lived here? Who needed all these structures? And all the agricultural terraces that are in between them, like spiders' webs. Who the hell was it? Why did they need so many of these stone circles? Why did they need so many agricultural terraces? And if it was for cows, even if we think about that ludicrous suggestion that these were cattle kraals for cattle, and some of them were dwellings for people. So even if half of them were for cattle, There was a lot of cattle these people had, millions and millions of cows in southern Africa at a time when there was supposedly nobody living here. Remember that our history books all tell us that, a few thousand years ago, southern Africa was sparsely populated. The only inhabitants of southern Africa were the Bushmen. Yeah. And there's evidence of Bushmen, obviously, everywhere. All of southern Africa is covered in Bushman art, no matter where you go. And there's evidence of Bushmen living here for at least 250,000 years. There are Bushman caves where there's an accumulation and sediment of fish and shells of that span 250,000 years and more, that shows the evidence of habitation by Bushmen in southern Africa. So we know the Bushmen are here. But who else was here building these stone structures? Because that's clearly not Bushman activity. And this is where it gets really interesting and very important as far as uncovering a whole new layer of hidden history that very few people are aware of. Even after 17 years of talking about this and traveling and doing lectures and releasing books about this, there's still a fraction of the global population aware of this. And mainstream academia keeps ignoring this. So these are just some ground photographs to show you the terraces. You can clearly see the terraces running up these mountains. You can also see the terraces from Google Earth very, very clearly. And there's another photograph from the ground. This one actually is a great combination that shows you the stone circles, the channels that run between them, and then the terraces that create this giant spider's web that connect it all together. And here is the photo. Here is the video that that Neil mentioned. So let me just play this video for you, and just enjoy this collage. It's about 3 minutes long, just giving you an idea of the stone circles, the lie of the land, and how they are connected to each other. There's a beautiful area that you can see them. Sometimes you can see much better depending on where the sun is. So if you're looking towards the sun, like in that shot there, you can see them beautifully. The circles, the terraces, the channels that connect them all together. And just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not there. What you'll also find, you see there's a river running at the bottom there. What you'll find is that many of these channels run into the river, and then they carry on the other side. And that's a very important discovery that I made quite recently, actually, that led me to the conclusion that these stone circles are much older than we originally imagined. It is a dense, complex, complicated network and a cluster of ruins that makes no sense. And believe it or not, our mainstream historians in South Africa have published books that claim that the ancient civilizations here were such a close-knit community that they created pathways from homestead to homestead. And they refer to these channels as pathways between that connect homesteads together. It's just this kind of nonsensical stuff that really makes your blood curdle when you see this appearing in our mainstream academic books. They just make up stuff with absolutely zero scientific or historical evidence for their conclusions. You'll notice it's very random. It's incredibly random. It's unpredictable. There's no pattern to it. There's no format. There's no grid. It's unpredictable. Wherever you go, there are stone circles, and you just never know how they're going to lie, how they connected to each other. You just go and explore, and every time you walk up the mountains and discover new stone circles, the terraces and channels, it is a very exciting and very uplifting discovery. You can see the road. There's a tar road that runs there. That's actually the road between the town of Machadodorp and Badplaas in South Africa, here in the province of Mpumalanga. You can see there's a car driving right there. And when you look at Google Earth, you can actually see that tar road that went right through the center of some of these stone circles, and they're still attached to the tar road. They're still there. And here you can see just really how badly eroded it is, how old it is, how it's been either destroyed by movement of water, floods. Many of the walls have been washed away, and yet they remain. The evidence remains. Sometimes the walls are very high and sometimes they've been washed away, but the foundations are still there. Yeah, spectacular, different parts. And what you saw there is pretty much in the area around me, here in the province of Mpumalanga, all within sort of 50-kilometer radius, which I guess that's a very big area, 50-kilometer radius. 50 to 100-kilometer radius is just covered in these ruins. And that's why I can make this leap to this conclusion, to say that there are millions of these stone circle ruins. The flagship among these ruins is unquestionably what has become known as Adam's Calendar. It was discovered in 2004 by Johann Heine, who introduced me to it in 2007. And by that stage, he'd done much research on it, on this site on his own, with no support from anybody. Then he introduced me to it, and everything changed. There's Johann showing me the first time he took me to Adam's Calendar, showing me how the shadow moves from the left stone to the right, left-hand side to the right-hand side of the stone. And it's that movement of the shadow that actually shows the passage of the year from winter solstice or from summer solstice on the left-hand side to the winter solstice on the right-hand side of that stone. So the calendar, the stone that's closest to Johann standing there is actually the calendar stone, and the shadow is cast by the stone in the foreground closer to us, and that's the stone that casts the shadow, and shows you where you are in the year. It's still reasonably accurate, obviously not exactly perfect accurate, but you can still see where the summer solstice and winter solstice is. So in fact, tomorrow, if you went to Adam's Calendar, the shadow, as the sun is setting, the shadow would be on the left-hand edge, very close to Johann, as the sun would be setting. And then by the time winter comes, the shortest day of the year, because tomorrow is the longest day of the year here in South Africa. And if you come back in June, it'll be, the shadow will end on the right-hand side of that stone. So it's clearly a calendar. Johann did all this original exploratory and research, which is absolutely incredible. Then I went and showed this to Baba Credo Mutwa. There you can see the book Adam's Calendar on the table. This was 2008. When I first met Baba Credo, and he burst into tears when he saw it, telling me that he remembers that place very fondly. He was initiated there in 1937 as a young shaman, and it was known as Inzalo Yelanga in Zulu, which means birthplace of the sun, where humanity was created by the gods to be the slaves in the gold mines. This is what Baba Credo Mutwa told me. It's not something I made up. These are verbatim his words to me when I first met him. And he told me a lot more about Adam's Calendar and the ancient ruins and the Anunnaki and the connectedness of all of this in Southern Africa. But that you'll find in my other videos. There are dozens of lectures on YouTube and also on my private video channel. If you want to join my private video channel, just go to michaeltellinger.com and sign up for my private Vimeo channel with hundreds and hundreds of hours of lectures, presentations, and very private videos and research. So this is an aerial photograph of Adam's Calendar. It's very, very broken. It's right on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Barberton impact crater, which is known as the oldest impact crater on Earth, going back to 3.2 billion years. That's according to mainstream geology. It's an very interesting place with some very, very old fossils and microbial life forms that were formed at that stage that are that geologists and other researchers in that field come and study all the time. So that ledge of the rock there drops down about 300 meters, and eventually it drops down to about very close to a kilometer into the Barberton Valley. There you can see it from the different perspective. This is a 3D resurrection of Adam's Calendar, or Inzalo Yelanga. And there you can see the Horus stone plus the 3 stones of Orion's belt. And that's the other fascinating thing. Not only is Adam's calendar aligned to north, south, east, west, but it's also aligned with the rise of Orion's belt, which is absolutely spectacular. And that rise of Orion's belt also happens to align with the pyramids in the valley. You can see the twin peaks, the 2 peaks there on the left-hand side. That's one of the best photographs ever taken early in the morning when Johann was doing his research in the early days. And they just so happened to capture the 2 pyramids down in the valley that are inextricably connected to Adam's calendar. And we know this because when you draw a golden spiral starting at Adam's calendar and the spiral spirals out, you can see one of the arms lands up right between the pyramids in the valley, which is probably about 8 kilometers or about 12 kilometers away. The valley spans 28 kilometers across from Adam's calendar to the town of Barberton, which happens to be a frontier gold mine from the 1800s, from the 1880s, when the whole gold mining rush exploded here in the province of Mpumalanga, which also happens to be just a few kilometers from Sheba Gold Mine, which has some very mysterious ancient gold mining activity, which I'm not going to go into, but I do go into in other lectures. Adam's calendar is also happens to be connected along this longitudinal line, along the 31 degrees east longitudinal line, or the Nilotic meridian. It runs all along the river Nile. It comes from Adam's calendar, goes through Great Zimbabwe, and if you carry on going north, it lands up right in the Great Pyramid of Giza. So obviously this is not accidental. This is by design. So whoever was active at the Great Pyramid was active at Great Zimbabwe, was active at Adam's calendar. And we know from our research in Southern Africa that that's where the Anunnaki, under the leadership of Enki, were very active in their gold mines. I'm not going to go into the details of that. Again, in many of my other lectures, I go into great detail about that and the evidence of the Anunnaki presence and the ancient gold mines. The evidence is overwhelming. In fact, you cannot refute it. We cannot refute it anymore. But here's just a very simple indication that the Anunnaki were most likely involved at the Great Pyramid as well, if their activity in Great Zimbabwe at Adam's calendar is as real as we see it to be. So the ruins were not dwellings or houses for people. So what were the ruins for? It's obvious if we start studying cymatic patterns and cymatic shapes and the shapes that sound creates in sand. Most of you should be aware of it by now. All this should make immediate sense very quickly. I'm not going to even show this video because it wastes precious time for us. When you put sand on a metal plate and you put vibrational frequencies through it, every sound frequency creates its own specific beautiful shape and pattern. It's called a cymatic pattern, and each frequency has its own unique cymatic shape. And that's exactly what we find with the stone circle ruins. Each stone circle ruin has its own special, unique shape, and that is because of the sound frequency that comes out of the earth. So each stone circle shows us the sound or the shape of the sound frequency coming out of the earth. And we know this because we've measured those frequencies. And it's really interesting because the frequencies of 7.83 hertz or the Schumann resonance seem to coincide, the length of those frequencies coincide and align with the shapes and sizes of these stone circle ruins. So it seems that the stone circle ruins or the stone circles respond and are representations of fractals or harmonics of the Schumann resonance and the Schumann frequencies. And some of the stone circles are smaller, some are larger. But remember, the harmonics is just a doubling of the frequency, right? So that's how it works. It works with electricity, it works with harmonics, with resonance, frequency, and that's pretty much what I've just mentioned there is the fundamental understanding of the laws of nature and the laws of creation and the toroidal fields and everything that we learn about of manifestation, sound, resonance, frequency, and the generation of energy, and including cymatic patterns, obviously collectively known as sacred geometry, right? That's what it ultimately comes down to. What I'm talking about falls into the broader study of sacred geometry. So it's now very obvious that these stone circles are energy generating devices. being generated by the sound frequency coming out of the earth. And whoever built them knew exactly how to pack the stones, what that cymatic pattern looked like, and they packed the stones along the cymatic pattern, which means they amplified the sound frequencies coming out of the ground, and in essence, turning that stone circle into an amplifier of Earth's natural resonance and Earth's natural frequencies. And this is why we have measured so many different frequencies in gigahertz and megahertz and sound frequencies and also electromagnetic fields and magnetic fields and even decibels coming out of the walls in such high quantities or such high levels that it boggles the mind. When I was doing this research many years ago, I was very actively involved with some experts on hypersound and studying and measuring hypersound, and they actually helped me a great deal in reaching certain conclusions about the energies and the frequencies coming out of these stone circles.